Well, the Gauteng provincial government has said this week that it is going to sue the editor of the Pretoria News newspaper, Piet Rampedi, and its owner, Independent Newspapers, over his claim that the Gauteng Premier and the Health MEC had hidden 10 babies. I'm talking about the famous decouplets that unfortunately don't exist. Rampedi had claimed the provincial government had taken the babies after they were all born to one woman. Rampedi's now admitted to his own company that the story was not true and apologized to independent newspapers. But he said that he still believes that 10 babies were born and continues to claim that, in fact, this woman did give birth. The Gauteng Health Department says that she did not. He's refused to retract the story. Glenda Daniels is an associate professor in the Department of Media Studies at Wits University. Professor, good afternoon to you. I mean, this is a very, very extraordinary story, and I'm going to use that word. Many people believed it for a while. It turned out, I think we can now say, not to be true. We now have a provincial government suing a journalist. I don't think this has happened before.
No, not as far as I know, Stephen. It hasn't happened before. And indeed, the story has got so many holes. It's such an extraordinary story, as you say, that I still believe that a government suing a media house would set a very bad precedent. However, what the journalist has done and what Pretoria News has done is it's not retracted the story. You know, initially, as you were just saying in your blurb just now, initially he had Piet Rampedi had a little retraction and a half-hearted apology, but only to his colleagues, I mean his immediate colleagues in his media group. And he didn't apologize or retract the story to the public, nor did he take back what he said about the Gauteng Department of Health. And he didn't apologize to his media colleagues at large for making what seems to be quite a dreadful mistake. And the reason why I say a dreadful mistake is because to date, no babies have been produced, have been seen. There is no evidence for the story. So this is an example of something that's horrific, actually, because, you know, it's just an example of a lack of verification of facts, a lack of evidence, a sensational story. Was it done for the clicking? You know, clicks in journalism gets more traction to the media company, to the websites, etc. So, no, to answer your question, I don't know of a Department of Health actually suing a newspaper company. But, of course, we have to also say that independent newspapers withdrew from the Press Council in 2016 on some obscure reason about the waiver. But is it also about that they don't want to be accountable, they don't want to be with the rest of their colleagues in an accountability system? It's not a legal system in the sense of you get put to jail, but it's a system of self-regulation, and it's a system about accountability and first and foremost about ethics, a code of ethics.
So, I mean, this is actually the problem, really, isn't it? Normally, in the usual way, if a newspaper did something wrong, you would complain to the press ombudsman, and that's part of the press council. I mean, if something goes wrong on TV or radio, you complain to the BCCSA. That's what these bodies are for. When Independent Group withdraws from that, I mean, the Gauteng provincial government said explicitly, in fact, if I understood them correctly, the only reason they were suing was that there was no other avenue for them. I mean, there was nothing else they could do to hold independent newspapers accountable. In a way, could we blame independent newspapers for creating this situation?
Well, then can you actually blame the Gauteng Department of Health for wanting to sue? So it's a problem with the newspaper company that they don't belong to the system. It weakens the system, it weakens ethics in journalism, it taints the whole profession when the largest newspaper group in the country has this kind of erring. There's no correction, there's no retraction, there's no withdrawal from the story, there's no apology from the story. And, you know, I was going to say that it was a half-hearted apology, and then this broke last night that Piet Rampedi is standing with his story, that in fact 10 babies do exist and were born, but he still can't say where they were born. He still can't give proof and evidence of it. And the story's gone international now, so it's highly embarrassing for South Africa as a whole. Oh, there's one other thing, Stephen. He also said, in his initial half-hearted apology, he said, this was a good news story. I didn't know that I had to investigate. Well, whether it's a column and an opinion piece, whether it's a good news story, I didn't know that there was a category for good news stories, or whether it's an investigative piece. You can't just go on rumor. You can't go on WhatsApps by the fathers of the babies whose family then later said, no, they don't exist. So there are a lot of facts in this whole story, facts, inverted commas, that just don't add up. How many different hospitals were involved and named in the story? To this day, how can somebody actually be standing by their story? It's really terribly embarrassing for journalism, I must say. Indeed, it's also come at the same time when the Reuters Oxford Institute for Journalism has actually released some latest facts about mainstream media has gained trust by the public by 4 points in South Africa and, in general worldwide. Which means people are turning away from, it could mean that people are turning away from social media where there are no verification of news, but anything sensational or juicy just gets spread because you're going to get more clicks, and you're going to get more likes, and you're going to get more retweets, etc. So this is, the fact that people are turning to mainstream media and the fact that in South Africa we've had quite a strong investigative press, and which has held power to account, and then this kind of story happens, it does end up tainting the profession somewhat, or the craft, if you want to call it that.
The symbol of the story, the person who wrote the story, is Piet Rampedi, but this couldn't have happened without Dr. Iqbal Survey, who owns the independent group, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because, he's a maverick with regard to publishers as a whole. He doesn't come from the industry himself. One wondered why he bought the Independent in the first place, and then it showed that he was siding with the corrupt faction in government at the time. And then he owes the PIC money, the Public Investment Commission. So, he's full of shenanigans, and he's quite a dodgy character. And he's also standing by his journalist without actually, this could be part of his editor. It could be part of the reason why Pretoria News is holding to its story and Piet Rampedi is doing the same. It could be pressure from Iqbal Survey. Don't know that for sure. I'm speculating here, of course.
There's a whole lot that goes on in this situation. I mean, you make the point that the precedent being set by the provincial government is wrong. But, I mean, what this would lead to, at least, is a court discovery process. Piet Rampedi would be put under oath and told to produce proof that the babies happened. And then we would know for sure what actually happened. Or, of course, up until that point, he would have to admit he was wrong.
Yeah, absolutely. So, everyone's waiting to hear. The story has now become about the editor, Piet Rampedi. If you look at what's happening on Twitter for the whole day, or since last night, or actually since the story broke, people supporting him and other people saying, he's got quite a reputation from past stories, etc. But let's look at the story itself. The story itself has holes. Where did the story come from? From a couple of WhatsApps that were passed on from the father of the babies that we have no evidence of at the moment, to Piet Rampedi, and then the family of the father saying that these babies do not exist, then the mother appearing somewhere else, taken to a police station for questioning. There's almost nothing that we can believe at the moment because there are so many varying stories. We don't know what the facts are, except for the fact that a journalist put this on a front page of a newspaper, and it became a worldwide story because it's a Guinness Book of Records story, because no woman's given birth to 10 babies before. So, you know, regarding the Department of Health, just to come back to your story, what other options do they have? You know, it could set, as I was saying, it could set a very bad precedent for censorship of journalists and, you know, censorship of media houses and all that sort of thing, which is why we have the press council system to go through the system. But if a particular media company does not purport to the system, I'm thinking, what other option do they have except to, I don't know what they would sue for, whether it would be defamation or false information. I don't know what the law would be that it would sue under. But where I would give Piet Rampedi free advice is to say, apologize and retract or produce the evidence of the 10 babies. A lot of newspapers and a lot of reports thus far have said there's no evidence for the babies. Therefore, these babies do not exist. So now the ball is back in Piet Rampedi's court, and he's still digging in his heels, and he's standing by the stories, and he still hasn't produced the evidence.
Professor Glenda Daniels, thank you very much indeed. Associate Professor at the Wits University Department of Media Studies. Really is quite an amazing story.